in a couple of minutes. Welcome to NFL Live. Dan Graziano here today with Mina Kimes and Tim Hasselbeck for the hour. And let's start, if you guys don't mind, in Kansas City, where Andy Reid announced Patrick Mahomes would participate in OTAs on a limited basis. Mahomes, you may remember, is recovering from a torn ACL and LCL he suffered in December. Here's more from the head coach on the plan for Mahomes moving forward.
He is in a good position to be able to do some things. There's some rules and regulations that go with that, Herbie, so we got to just make sure that we're on top of that part. But if he can do some things, phase 2, remember, is there's no contact, there's no offense versus defense. It's phase 3 that you get into that. Once you start the clock, then the clock's got to be rolling. You just have to evaluate what you want to do there. But he's in a position where he can do everything, I think.
So, Tim Hasselbeck, we're about 5 months post-injury here on Patrick Mahomes. What do you make of the timetable, the way it's coming together this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Mahomes, who had his mind set on trying to be back for week 1, it seems like he's trying to do everything to be back for week 1. And I think Andy Reid is smart to say, like, look, he's going to participate on a limited basis of the stuff that he can do. I think it's just, at least at this time of year, Dan, it's a gentle reminder. We take for granted how quickly guys bounce back. We're talking about a December injury. We've seen, this type of video. Really, to me, it goes to show you how much work and progress needs to happen before he's ready to be back to be the old Patrick Mahomes. So, look, I think the Chiefs as an organization are going to be smart. They may have to protect Patrick from himself, in terms of his desires to be back. But it's also just a little bit of a warning. Like, not everyone's recovery from an ACL is exactly the same. And because we've seen elite athletes recover quickly in the past, I think we just think it's going to be a foregone conclusion that it's how it is for everyone. And so I do think that Kansas City should be prepared should they encounter some type of setback or slowdown in his recovery.
And a reminder, they brought in Justin Fields as the backup quarterback who presumably would play if Patrick Mahomes isn't ready to go at the start of the season. Mina, the Chiefs' draft was almost entirely about defense. Do you think they've done enough on the offensive side of the ball to help Mahomes when he does come back?
I would say yes and no. No, they are really just running it back at pass catcher, right? The receivers and the tight ends as well. I thought they might add a tight end, and they didn't. As you alluded to, the only receiver they drafted was Cyrus Allen in the 5th round. So I think they're hoping for a bounce-back year from Rashee Rice. There's still some free agents out there, though, so they might not be totally done. The area that they did make a strong effort to improve was a run game that was, amongst the least explosive in football last year. Signing Kenneth Walker III to the big contract, drafting Emma Johnson out of Nebraska, who I think is a nice compliment. And also, notably, bringing back Eric Bieniemy from Chicago. And I think that's going to be where you need to see some improvement, not just in the personnel, but schematically. The Chiefs' RPO-based offense is not as effective as it was a few years ago, particularly in terms of running the ball. And I'm interested in seeing, Tim, if Eric can maybe bring some of those principles from Chicago, where they ran the ball so well under center, to Kansas City, because it does feel like there needs to be some evolution in that regard.
Yeah, I do. And I think some of the evolution will be getting back to roots of really what, Bieniemy and Andy Reid truly believe in. And I agree with you, Mina. I think it is yes and no. Kenneth Walker's a big addition because they had neglected running back for a while. They kind of just said, look, we're going to make it work with, the guys that are here. And that didn't work. The other thing that they were doing is they were drafting wide receivers. They also were always in the veteran market at receiver. And none of those guys really panned out. And so you could look at their team. I think it was 2 years ago they led the league in drops. They just have not been a team that's really been that strong at receiver. And so I think when you look at that, and then on top of it that, Travis Kelce's only getting older, you can look at it and say, look, I'm sure Mahomes appreciates the help at running back. But I don't think you can be done addressing, receiver, or even looking at, ways to improve at tight end, especially when you consider they've been a defensive-led team the last couple of years, and now you have your quarterback coming off of an ACL injury. You would think you would try to make life pretty easy for him.
And most of the changes for the Chiefs on offense were on the coaching staff. Mina referenced Eric Bieniemy returning as offensive coordinator in place of Matt Nagy, but they have a new wide receivers coach. They have a new running backs coach. So a lot of changes structurally on that side of the ball. We'll see how that all works out. Here's number 1 overall pick. Fernando Mendoza was on the practice field this weekend with his new Raiders teammates. Mendoza working on learning head coach Clint Kubiak's offense, which is a lot different from what he ran in college. Like a lot of college quarterbacks, Mendoza did not spend very much time under center. He threw just over 1,000 passes in his college career, and only 5 came when he was under center. Clint Kubiak was the Seahawks offensive coordinator last year, and that team operated under center at the 2nd highest rate in the NFL and went on to win the Super Bowl, so you would expect Clint Kubiak to keep that going. Mendoza talked about that learning curve this weekend.
I believe it's the added footwork. Instead of being back there in shotgun, you really have to get back to make sure you get depth so you can best serve your offensive lineman, still be on time, still decipher the defense. And with that, it's really having an emphasis on those first 2 steps, on securing the snap, getting out of there, and powerful with having quick feet.
Tim, you played quarterback. How difficult is that transition playing in shotgun to going under center as much as he'll be asked to do it?
I will say this. I think it's significant. There definitely is a change. There is a difference. The difficulty of it, I think, over time has been proven it really isn't something that you need to be hung up on. While most guys play in college completely, in the shotgun, guys do, prior to that have some experience playing under center for the most part. And then immediately after their college stuff is done, they start training to play under center because they know they'll be asked to do it. And you look at other quarterbacks, number 1 overall picks, and how much they played under center in college. Look at these numbers. This isn't new that we have guys that are drafted at the top of the draft, and you look at them and you go, well, he's never played under center before. And now, obviously, there hasn't been wild success with everybody on that list, but there's been plenty of success with guys that are on that list. And so, look, if you are talented enough to be the number 1 overall pick, you are talented enough to learn how to play from under center. And I think what most quarterbacks end up finding out is that there are benefits to it that they really enjoy. And so while it might feel uncomfortable at first, it ends up being a benefit throughout their career in terms of the success they can have do it. Just even Kyler Murray alone, the last 2 years, you saw an uptick in some of his production while playing under center. So I think Mendoza is going to be fine with it. He's going to, especially in the Kubiak system, understand how tied his feet are to the timing of every single thing that he does. And ultimately, I think that makes you a more consistent quarterback. And I don't think it'll be a huge hurdle for Mendoza.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially because, when you watch Mendoza on tape, even though he's not under center, you see some of the attributes that I think will translate in that offense. He throws well on the move. I imagine Kubiak's going to ask him to boot out a fair amount. I think he'll be good at that. I actually think the area where he has to work on the most, is inside the pocket, because when he turns his back to the defense and then turns around, if the pocket starts to compress, you want to see him step up as opposed to dropping his eyes the way he did at times in college. Mendoza's comp, one of his comps in the NFL is Jared Goff, similar frame, accuracy, toughness. But the thing he has to get better at, that is Goff's superpower in the league, is stepping up and throwing the ball off a play action over the middle of the field. And I think Mendoza can absolutely do that, to be clear. It's just something that is going to he's going to get better at with reps. As Tim highlighted, so many quarterbacks have gotten better at that in the league.
And important to remember, too, they brought in veteran quarterback Kirk Cousins, who they feel can start while Mendoza takes whatever time he needs to get up to speed. So how many games into the season that is remains to be seen. Sticking with the Raiders, we also got an update on Jermod McCoy, who's recovering from a significant knee injury that led to him being picked in the 4th round, despite a lot of people feeling like he had first-round talent. This is from our Raiders reporter, Ryan McFadden. Media was able to watch a pair of team periods before going inside. Cornerback Jermod McCoy wasn't involved. He continued to do agility work on the side field, also fielded punts during individual. Willis threw out the first pitch at the Marlins game Friday. Didn't go super great. What did you guys make of Malik's first pitch effort here at the Marlin game? A little high and away.
Do it. When you throw for a living, when you throw for a living, you've got, like, you can't do this. You can't. Now, listen, Mahomes has bailed everyone out for eternity for having a bad first pitch because, like, we know how good a quarterback he is. He's done that. He's given everybody a pass. But, like, if you're going to have some, like, pride, practice a little bit beforehand and go throw a strike.
Yeah, look, we can show you Mahomes' lousy first pitch, but we want to show you a better one. And this one came from Mina Kimes, who threw out the first pitch at a Seattle Mariners game. See, now that's a strike. Like, what's the trick?
Well, first of all, I'm, as you can see, very far in front of the mound. So
no
there's
rule
that.
Against that.
I think it might be the slowest first pitch ever recorded in the history of Major League Baseball. But it was a strike. It was a strike.
It was a strike. They didn't have to jump for it.
Mina, can I ask, did you prepare at all? Did you practice? Were you like, you know what, I want to make sure I do a good job
Tim,
with this? Just like a couple of throws in the front yard?
You are going to love this answer. I asked Tom House for help, and he gave me video pointers and coached me up. The famous quarterback coach.
That's right.
It's all about the positioning of the back foot is what he taught me.
All about the preparation.
A little practice and preparation.
For Mina Kimes.
There we go.
Maybe Malik Willis should have given Tom House a call before last Friday's Marlins game. Let's read and react now to some of the most interesting sound from the weekend. First of all, off we have Panthers GM Dan Morgan talking about Bryce Young's future with the team.
In terms of, long-term contract, that's something that we're talking about here internally, and we'll do it at the right time. I think you see him just getting better and better every single year, understanding the offense. He's such a good processor, and just, a guy that's just a pleasure to have around the building every day. And as you see him mature, you just see him become a better leader every single year, and the operation's getting faster every year. So we really feel like the arrow's up with Bryce.
Panthers and Bryce Young were in the playoffs last year. Amina, what do you make of the way the Panthers are building around him?
I really love the emphasis they put this offseason on the offensive line because last year had some pretty significant injuries. Robert Hunt, who is their big money guard, only played 2 games. He comes back. Ike Ekwonu did get hurt. The left tackle got hurt in the playoffs. But they not only signed Rasheed Walker out of Green Bay to a 1-year deal, they also drafted Monroe Freeling in the first round. And I think having that depth, that tackle, combined with Robert Hunt coming back, you're going to see significant improvement in this Panthers offensive line, which should help Bryce Young a great deal.
Number 4 overall pick, Carnell Tate, was also on the field this weekend. Here's his offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll, on the rookie's ability to pick up different parts of the offense.
We'll give him as much as he can handle. He is smart. We try to have all our skill guys, Paul, learn all the spots. So there's 5 eligible receivers on every pass play. The guys that are out there running routes, not just learn one spot to understand the entire system, the scheme that you're running. It's helpful if those guys can learn multiple things.
Tim, how do you see Tate helping Cam Ward in this Titans offense?
Well, they definitely needed pass catchers around him, and they've addressed that obviously with Tate in the draft and then Wan'Dale Robinson in free agency. Hearing Daboll say that, clearly they want Tate to have as many opportunities to get on the field and have an impact. It was a bit of a surprise pick, and so they're going to need him to contribute in a big way quickly. I do expect most of his work to be done as an outside receiver, so while he's talking about learning all the different spots, I think Robinson, based on his size, is going to be a guy that plays inside, and I think Tate primarily will be a receiver that's playing outside.
The Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks had their rookie minicamp this weekend, and their first-round pick, running back Jadarian Price, was on the field. He was seen catching passes during the workouts, and head coach Mike McDonald talked about Price's ability as a pass catcher.
That's not like an extra point of emphasis. I think it's just because of camp, probably more space plays rather than keeping him in traffic, and just trying to be smart on how we utilize him in this camp. Getting off to the right start. But did a good job. But it's definitely part of our offense.
Mina, Zach Charbonnet coming off major injury. Kenneth Walker now with the Chiefs. How important is the rookie Price to Seattle's success this season?
Extremely important. I mean, this was a team that last year, with Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator, ran on first and second down the second highest rate in the NFL, behind only Baltimore. Kubiak may be gone, but I think the offense is going to be pretty similar. And Walker, who we talked about earlier, is gone. Kenneth Walker, you mentioned, and I have about him is just whether or not he can do it because we haven't seen it. It was interesting hearing them talking about him catching passes. I actually think there's a tremendous upside there. The only problem was at Notre Dame, he was behind the best running back in football. And so it'll be interesting to see what he looks like with more of a workload, both as a runner and a pass catcher. And we're going to see it pretty early, I think.
I completely agree. In terms of the workload, I think you almost have to have an anticipation that he's going to be the starting tailback week 1. And as the starting tailback week 1, you're thinking, look, he probably has to touch the ball 15 or more times per game, which is not unusual for a guy that's drafted in the first round at that position, but the starter week 1. Charbonnet off of the ACL injury. Obviously Kenneth Walker's not there. To me, I want to say he doesn't have to earn the job. He will, but I mean, it's basically handed to him. And I think when you look at that and you look at the way Seattle ran the football for much of the regular season, they weren't great at it. And so there's a possibility that if he can do what they think he can, that they'll actually be better running the football during the regular season than they were a year ago.
To that point, Seahawks ran the ball at the 3rd highest rate in the NFL last year, but ranked 25th in yard touchdown in the Super Bowl. Things have really changed in Philadelphia since then. Adam Schefter reporting that Brown is expected to be traded to the Patriots after June 1st. 2025 was a difficult season in Philadelphia for Brown, especially when it came to getting open. 30% of Brown's targets last year had a defender less than 1 yard away. That was not only a career high for him, but it was the highest such rate in the NFL. Tim, when you hear that, do you think that Brown is declining in some way, or just the Eagles' offense wasn't working last year?
I think it was more about the Eagles' offense than his ability. He's still supremely talented. He's kind of in this class of big, strong, fast wide receivers that score touchdowns, and that's why I think, when you look at, assuming he's in New England, the impact that he can have. When you look at Davante Adams at the Rams, you pair a big, strong receiver who can win with people around him because of his size and strength with a good quarterback. You can catch a lot of touchdowns. A.J. Brown is a guy that catches touchdowns. You see Mike Evans on the list. Really, the outlier is Tyreek Hill, and that's because of his speed. But like Mike Evans is one of those guys that over time, he doesn't run the same that he once did, but he still scores touchdowns. That's why I think there's such a desire for A.J. Brown coming from New England. They need to help Drake May, and I think you pair a receiver that's big and strong and a physical matchup problem, in the red zone, you can score a lot of touchdowns, which is hard to come by in the NFL. A.J. Brown is one of those guys, and it's a good fit in New England.
Yeah, I think the lack of separation, or as you guys put up the stat, having defenders near him had less to do with A.J. Brown and more to do with the predictability of the Eagles' offense. And even if he is losing a step in terms of separation, as Tim said, the contested catch ability, the frame, makes him such a weapon in the red zone and also on those types of 50-50 balls that Drake May likes to throw. He is aggressive, putting the ball in play downfield. You saw that with Kayshon Boutte, who I think took a real step forward with May, and I think A.J. Brown is just like a turbo-powered version of that. I also think having May, who is more willing to throw over the middle of the field, will unlock some usage on the sort of digs and in-breakers we saw him used on in Tennessee earlier in his career. So if I'm New England, I think this is a no-brainer. It's very rare you get an opportunity to add a receiver of this caliber.
Should be a boost to the Patriots. The Eagles are likely to miss A.J. Brown, but in preparation for his expected departure, they drafted Mekhi Lemon, USC wide receiver, with the 20th overall pick. Lemon was on the field at rookie minicamp this weekend, and he talked about playing with Eagles receiver Devontae Smith.
Super humble guy, super chill, super calm, kind of my type of vibe. So I feel like me and him clicked on those things. So, when we step on the field, he already know he got that dog mentality. So I feel like me and him are going to click well, definitely.
So, Mina, if we are assuming an Eagles offense without A.J. Brown and with Devontae Smith as the number one wide receiver, what do you think is the biggest change we'll see?
Yeah, I think the biggest change isn't so much in the receivers or how they're used, but the nature of the entire offense, right? With Sean Mannion coming over as offensive coordinator from Green Bay, there is the expectation that Jalen Hurts is going to be under center more, and there's going to be more play action. And I think it's easy to imagine Devontae Smith being used in that type of offense. He will line up outside more with Mekhi in the slot, but I think about his ability to separate downfield and the way that offense will unlock deep over routes, for example, where he can separate and Hurts can throw the ball into space. I think there's just more pressure on Hurts, quite frankly, when you think about that new scheme, because the pass catchers, to me, do fit nicely into that type of offense.
That's the key, 100%. Pressure, on the quarterback, not necessarily young receivers or, a number 2 receiver that's now going to be a number 1 receiver. Look, continuity matters. There has been so much change in Philadelphia year over year and year after year, for that matter. I think this really also comes down to pressure on Hurts. The pressure on Nick Sirianni, because look, in his tenure as head coach of the Eagles, he's had seasons where he has not necessarily managed the change on the coaching staff well, and they suffered for it. Then he's had years where, it has worked as he's made coordinator changes, and that's worked. Well, now he's got to deal with it again, and he's got to deal with it with a first-year coordinator, and there's a lot of pressure on the head coach, quarterback, and first-year coordinator, and so I do think this will have to be one of Sirianni's best coaching jobs, if not best coaching job, to be competitive in a division that is getting a lot better around him than it has been in previous years. So to me, there's a lot to this, well beyond just A.J. Brown and Mekhi Lemon.
And just to illustrate your point, Tim, on the instability, Eagles are now on their 5th different offensive coordinator in 6 seasons, and Jalen Hurts is on his 13th different play caller of his college and pro career. Just astounding. The man is only 27 years old. So a lot to change, as always, around Jalen Hurts. The Washington Commanders landed linebacker Sonny Styles in the draft, but questions remain for them on the offensive side of the ball. They did add a wide receiver in the 3rd round. It was Antonio Williams. Top wideout from last season, Deebo Samuel, remains a free agent. Of course, they have Terry McLaurin. They're hoping for better health there. Washington will enter this season with a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. Commanders general manager Adam Peters talked recently about getting quarterback Jaden Daniels some help this offseason.
He's had an incredible offseason. He's really been diligent about working in this offseason. He's been out in LA, but he's working with his trainers out there, with his throwing coach, and he's in great shape. He came back here phase 1. He looks great. He feels great. He's healthy. So that's how it starts. And then obviously we've spent this whole offseason really surrounding him with players who can help him and make sure that he doesn't have to put this team on his shoulders all the time and be Superman.
That's been a big story early in Jaden Daniels' NFL career, Mina, that a lot has been asked of him. Do you think the Commanders have done enough this offseason to lighten the load?
I think they made steps in the right direction. I do think that Antonio Williams, who they drafted in the 3rd round, is going to need to be impactful year 1 in a way you wouldn't necessarily want out of a 3rd round receiver. But when you think about this group, with McLaurin as the true X, Antonio Williams fits in nicely alongside him, working primarily from the slot. He's not the biggest guy, but he's really good with the ball in his hands. And also he's very sudden and gets open quickly, which I think is a good pairing also with Daniels. One of the things I love about Jaden Daniels' game isn't the athleticism or the slot fades, it's the efficiency. He will get that ball out quick. He will find a receiver who uncovers quickly, and you can move the ball efficiently with him. And I think Williams is a really nice pairing with that skill set and should be helpful.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment on Williams. I think the fear I would have at receiver just in general is they just don't have the top end speed that some teams have. And so the explosiveness, things like that the offense may lack, I think there's got to be some concern with that. Look, I've said it before and I'll maintain it. I think Jaden Daniels is the closest thing to Lamar Jackson in the league in terms of his explosiveness and ability. And so, look, does it have to be perfect around him? No, it doesn't. I think he's proved that at times. I also think this, though. expectations have changed. You know, he had an outstanding rookie season, and once that happened, expectations changed. We saw what happened with C.J. Stroud. Expectations changed after a great rookie season, and things haven't really been the same. So I think there's a challenge here in that he's incredibly gifted. I think that there is enough around him, but it's not, look, the help that Baltimore eventually got Lamar. It's not that much help. I don't believe that that's what's surrounding him in Washington. And much like we were just talking about with Philadelphia, you have an extremely young, completely inexperienced play caller. And look, there could end up being some serious growing pains with that as well. So I do think you have to be careful with a young, really talented player as the expectations change, and then all the things that are going on around him. Is it really setting him up to play at the level everyone's expecting him to play at?
Right, we'll have to learn a new offense as Jaden Daniels tries to recapture that rookie year magic from a couple of seasons ago. Time now for some top stories from today, starting with the Green Bay Packers signing former Jets quarterback Tyrod Taylor. Packers, of course, looking for a new backup to Jordan Love after Malik Willis signed with the Dolphins this offseason to be their starting quarterback. Quarterback Anthony Richardson reported for the Colts voluntary workout program on Monday after staying home the past couple of weeks. Colts and Richardson mutually agreed to seek a trade in late February, but obviously that has not yet come to pass. And Los Angeles is where former Browns tight end David Njoku was today, visiting the Chargers, sources told Ian Rappaport. Njoku has also visited the Ravens. He missed multiple games with Cleveland last season due to a knee injury, still looking for a new. Mini camps began across the league this past weekend. The Raiders were one of those, and number 1 overall pick Fernando Mendoza was out there learning his new offense. He's got plenty to learn, but one of the things the Raiders liked about him is he came up big when it mattered most last season. Mendoza led the FBS in yards per dropback on 3rd and long. He was top 3 in yards per dropback when tied or trailing late. And he was mistake-free in the red zone, 27 touchdowns and not one single interception. His skill set was on full display on this 51-yard pass to Charlie Becker against Ohio State. And if you thought it looked good from that perspective, Dan Orlovsky is now going to take you inside Mendoza's perspective with the help of the Status Pro Visualizer, which allows the recreation of the play exactly as it happened in the game.
The moment in the look. It's my favorite Fernando Mendoza play this season. Second half, Big Ten championship game against the great defense in Ohio State. And I want to draw the concept because it's a vertical and horizontal stretch from a pass game perspective. The vertical concept, okay, we're going to take this inside receiver, push him down the field, and he's running what's known as a pylon route. Those pylons down there, that's his target and or angle. His job, find the nearest safety, run through his inside shoulder to try to collect him, or alert and ready for the football. And then we take this slot receiver, we're going to push him on a seam route, and we're going to run a big post down the field. Just from an up-top perspective, that's the vertical part of this concept. Let's go be Fernando. Let's erase that. Now where's the horizontal? Take this backside tight end. We're going to run him on a shallow cross, and then this outside receiver really on a deep hook concept, okay? Up top, that's what it's going to look like. Now let's go be Fernando once again, because the defense is going to tell us really who we're going to throw the football to. When you get to the line of scrimmage, you're Fernando, you're trying to figure out what's the defense going to be in. I go across the line of scrimmage. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defensive linemen. So those 5 defensive linemen make me think, okay, it's going to be man-to-man coverage. And then I look out here, I go, that defender's probably covering him in man, that defender covering him in man, that defender covering him in man, and this outside corner covering him in man, safety in the middle of the field, and then, oh, by the way, that linebacker being right next to my back. This, everything from Ohio State defense says man-to-man coverage. Now, if you're Fernando and you catch this snap and you drop back, your first thing is going to be, okay, what's the backside defender do? Wait, I thought it was man coverage. That backside defender is not running with him. He's hanging back here. Ohio State lied. Pre-snap, they show man-to-man. Post-snap, they're going to play what we call an invert cover 2. So what does that mean for Fernando? He sees that backside defender. He's not playing in man anymore. His job is just going to be hang on the backside and play a zone concept here, okay? This safety that I thought was going to be in the middle of the field, His job is now going to be to get over the top and play a half-field zone safety. And then this corner out here, his job is going to be get back into the half field and play a half field safety. So the vacancy from a quarterback perspective is I want to throw that vertical concept, and I want to throw that vertical concept in the middle of the field. That's where the vacancy is. And so when you're Fernando Mendoza and you drop back and you see that those safeties start to widen, see that green box, that's perfect. Now I want to take a shot at that football or that middle of the field, but I have to see this defender. So if you're Fernando, we climb the pocket. So this defender, if he stays low, I'm going to launch this ball. I want to go back to be Fernando. I'm going to launch this ball to that pylon, okay? But now that I see that the defender is widening, okay, that defender is going to continue to widen and widen and widen. I want to then go be back to Fernando. I want to take that shot down the middle of the field to my big-time playmaker in Charlie Becker, okay? So Fernando Mendoza gets to the line of scrimmage, and his ability to see that defensive line and that rotation of coverage is the biggest deal. I want to go be Fernando. Remember, this is a massive moment. You get to the line of scrimmage, and Ohio State is presenting you 5 guys across the line, and everything says man coverage. Then you have to catch the snap, see that backside defender is not playing there, eyes to the middle of the field, see Becker down, and the vacancy in the middle of the field is where you got to throw that football for a massive play. This swings the momentum of the football game, gets Indiana right back in it, and gives them the opportunity to become Big Ten champions. Fernando Mendoza did not see a lot of looks from defenses that presented like this one from Ohio State. He saw it in the right moment.